Thanks everybody for joining us today. I'll do an intro in just a minute, but first I'd like to do just a little bit of housekeeping for those who are here getting CPE credits. I'll be pausing with a code word slide every few slides that will have a number on it. If you miss that code word to input, don't worry, it's going to be on the top right-hand corner of the next page, so you'll have plenty of time to see that code word and enter it. And then if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the moment. Go ahead and type them into your into the QA section of the chat, and the administrators are going to be able to get some of those questions over to me, so I'll be able to answer them. And then we're going to save a few minutes at the end for Q&A as well. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get started. And again, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. My name's Greg Bucko. I'm a consultant working with Keiter Data Solutions. I have spent 20 years in data analytics, AI, machine learning, business intelligence, you name it, analytics. And spent most of the last decade leading analytics teams across a number of organizations, and have spent the last year helping organizations understand their data better and get their head around where the future is going with data and data analytics. And of course, AI is a big part of that conversation, which is why I'm talking to anybody who will listen about artificial intelligence and why they need to get their hands dirty with it, at least right now. So joining me at the end of this presentation, we're going to do a little bit of a demo, and my partner in crime there, Subhash Jaini, will be joining us. Subhash, say hello to the good people.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Subhash. That's what they would all say. And so, again, I just want to thank you guys for joining us. Let me jump right in so that hopefully we have enough time to cover everything that we need to cover, okay? The goal today is I just want you to leave here after this hour, you're sitting there at your desk, you're eating lunch, just feeling a little bit more confident about engaging with artificial intelligence, or if you're already engaging with artificial intelligence, right? If you're already using generative AI tools, then at least come away with a little bit different perspective on them. A few things that this presentation is not going to be, right? We're not going to give a detailed history of AI, which is a very interesting topic, something I love, but it's not going to be highly technical, right? This is for people of all different experience levels. And then maybe most importantly, it's not going to be overly speculative, right? There's a lot of speculation about AI and where it's going. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the elephants in the room with AI, but we're not going to dive into speculation, things that aren't, kind of based in reality. And that's what I really want to focus on, because there's plenty to talk about there, okay? Let's start out with some just brief definitions so we're all on the same page about what is AI and some of the other terms that are floating around. It refers to the field of computer science that's capable of performing tasks that usually require folks like us to do, right? And so it's really as simple as that. When people ask about machine learning are the tools that allow AI to work, right? It focuses on creating those algorithms that make artificial intelligence possible, things like neural networks, right? And then robotics is really the physical form of AI taking on physical form in the real world, and they interact with the real world. Now, there's different types of AI that we should be aware of. There's narrow AI, right? There's an AI that's really good at a single task. And we've been using this kind of AI for years, right? Things like Google search, our Netflix recommendations, Siri and Alexa. Those are all things that have a sort of narrow performance band and are really good at specific tasks. Where things have changed in the last year for the masses is generative AI, right? It can create new and original content, and it learns from example, right? It learns from data, and it's an emergent technology, obviously, and it's a powerful one. And then you hear a lot about sort of super AI, and this has several different names and variations, and this is why we're not going to get terribly speculative. But this is the idea that it can make that AI can make completely autonomous decisions without the use or even the interaction of humans, just based on goals. And so that's when you get into things like existential risk. So again, we're not going to talk about that, but just know that that is the future. It's not here yet, but it's certainly something that everybody who understands AI is aware of. Here's our first code word for today, 300. And just remember, or those who didn't get a chance to hear me earlier, that code word is going to be on the top right-hand corner of the next slide. So you never have to worry about hurry. You won't miss it, I promise you. Let's talk about different applications of generative AI. Of course, there's the most popular one out there, the language models, right? The ChatGPT by OpenAI, the Googles, Microsoft is using various tools, Llama, images, Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, all very effective image generators. And both language and image are definitely the most sophisticated of the generative AI disciplines. But certainly emerging ones are around things like audio, as well as video. And although I wouldn't say that they have reached the same level of robustness as language or image models, in the next year or two, audio and video will be very much a part of the generative AI landscape for average people. But why now? Why is it that in the last year, AI has suddenly had this resurgence? And where did this generative AI aspect come from? And there's a few accelerators, right? One is it's faster, more efficient hardware running artificial intelligence. So a big boost in performance. The introduction of something called transformers. We won't dive into detail there, but just know that these transformers allow for greater attention on particular parts of a word or phrase. And so you're able to do much more complex calculations with the transformer in a much more robust and effective way. And so these transformers really revolutionize the way they're able to build these generative AI models. Advancements in open source code, as well as good old-fashioned money, billions and billions of dollars that have been invested and are being invested currently in generative AI. Now, where are we with generative AI in terms of the hype cycle? Well, right now, Gartner thinks we're at the peak of inflated expectations. That's probably true. I'm not even sure we've reached the peak yet. But there's no doubt there are some highly inflated expectations of what generative AI can do for people as well as organizations. And so hopefully some of the conversation today will demystify that. Now, threats of AI, right? Those elephants in the room that I mentioned earlier, okay? Things like existential threat. Will it end the world? I don't know. Neither do you. And so the best thing to do is to understand AI and understand the risks and the complexity of AI if we're going to prevent any kind of existential threat. That's my only message on that subject. Social and cultural threats, same thing. Will AI manipulate us? It already has been, and it probably will. That's not too far-fetched of an opinion. Will it make us dumber? I don't know about that either. Some might argue it could make us much more effective at a lot of things. And I tend to fall into that camp myself. And will it take my job? I don't know. But I do know that embracing AI is going to give you a distinct advantage in the new marketplace. There's just no doubt about that, the AI-driven marketplace. So will it take my job? Don't know. But should you embrace it in order to try to keep your job or to do your job better? 100%. That's not a controversial opinion. But let's get into it. Let's get into working with generative artificial intelligence, right? Before we do that, code word 780, for those who are following along at home. And just as a reminder, I'm happy to take questions throughout the presentation. Just go ahead and type your question in, and and they'll get that over to me. How will organizations embrace generative AI, right? Everyday tools like PowerPoint, Word, Excel are going to begin to see that generative AI integration, and already are available and are on people's desktops as we speak. Microsoft's Copilot product, as well as the similar product from Google. Both are retailing around $30. Neither of them are open to everyone. It's sort of a slow-moving beta program. The cost, from a seat perspective, is very high, and obviously it's very untested. And we're going to talk a little bit about the risks of AI, the risks that are not the ones we mentioned before, but the risks that I can quantify for you in a few minutes. And we'll talk about how those risks could impact products like Copilot from Microsoft. Next, we're going to see function-specific tools, things like SAP and Workday and Salesforce, really doubling down on their AI capabilities. We're already seeing that. We've been seeing announcements really since the beginning of 2023 on different AI tools. A lot of companies are playing catch up, and certainly the quality of what they're introducing into their products varies greatly. And it also varies in terms of how much AI they're actually using. It's become an attractive word to use from a marketing perspective. And so, but those who understand generative AI can ask the right questions in terms of what is this AI exactly, and how does it work? And so those are the kind of questions that myself and others within Keiter Data Solutions help businesses understand. Is if we're going to implement this product, how is it going to impact our workflow and our data pipeline? All important questions to ask, and really things we're going to be asking right now, because in the next 12 to 24 months, these are going to emerge in those enterprise tools that we all use every day. Next, we're going to start to see custom enterprise embeddings, and basically what that means is to be able to create your own GPT or chat GPT type of experience within your organization, right? So all of the sort of institutional knowledge that is available in that organization could be captured. And we're talking about emails, and we're talking about text messages and Teams and any kind of communications, workbooks, manuals, anything like that can be fed into a base model, a foundational model like GPT-4, and be trained to be bespoke to that particular organization. That's going to be really powerful, and the demand for that kind of functionality is going to be only increasing. Because it makes so much sense. And, for years, I've heard organizations clamoring for better knowledge management within their organizations. This really is, and there's been a lot of solutions over the years, but this really is the thing that's going to bring together knowledge management within organizations and make it an effective discipline. And so that's...
These large language models are amazing. And this is just like a public service announcement as you guys explore within your organization. I noticed on Facebook, I was advertised, just upload your company data for just $500 and we'll build a chat GPT for you. So just a quick public service announcement. Don't do that, because they're not making money on the 500. They're making money on your institutional knowledge. They could take it to another electric company, another logistics company, and take those conversations, the help desk knowledge, not just search and replace, but actually take all that knowledge and workmanship you've put a lot of work into maintaining and running your business. It could end up in your competitor's hand, but also somebody you don't want's hand. So just as you're going through different of these tools, you have to kind of see, and you can always say there's a service agreement. Well, if they're in another country, they could say, well, we got hacked, sorry, and all of a sudden now your data's on the market. So there's ways you can do it locally, but yeah, just talk with your IT team, make sure the security, so we're not having like shadow marketing or shadow now there's shadow anything. These language models could be so powerful they could change your organization, but that same data could also be used for different reasons.
Yeah, that's a really important PSA. I appreciate that. The more you know. There are a lot of people who are using AI as an excuse for fraudulent activity or as the means of fraudulent activity. And so being careful is really key around this kind of technology. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. And then finally, in terms of how generative AI will be embraced by organizations, there's just going to be a greater proliferation, not just of AI, but just of data, narrow AI, robotics, all of the applications. Suddenly people are talking about and thinking about what AI can do for them. And so, generative AI is an incredible product, an incredible solution for many things, but there are still great use cases for developing narrow AI, project-based narrow AI that can really solve specific problems for your organization. That's something Keiter Data Solutions has specialized in for a long time. And so, we're very bullish on not just generative AI, but just data and data analytics, and more traditional machine learning and AI in general. Okay. Now, where to start? Should we start with ChatGPT? I still argue yes. And there is a lot more choices out there than ever before, and a lot of great starting places. I still recommend ChatGPT for a couple of reasons. One, it's still rated the most powerful large language model in the world. Yes, there's been some that are catching up quickly, and it certainly has its weaknesses, but I do still think it's probably the best way for people to interact with generative AI specifically, okay? And then a great way to become familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of generational AI. I have been really preaching people to use these tools carefully, which we'll talk about in a second, but the reason I want people to use these tools, especially in their own personal lives, is to get used to not just what it can do for you, but also some of the things that you need to be watching out for. Use these tools when the stakes are low to understand how to deal with these tools when the stakes are much higher. And that's really the key. And so if there's still some folks who are holding out on trying something like ChatGPT, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to try it, but keep it safe and keep it low risk, okay? Let's just do a quick explanation for those out there who don't quite understand how generative AI works, how these models are built. And man, this is a really high level explanation. But it's pre-trained on an enormous, astronomical amount of data. The data that we've never seen in terms of size before used for an application have been used for creating GPT, GPT-3, GPT-4, and all of the other generative AI tools out there. Just a ton of data. And if we were building an image-based generative AI, then we would be using tons and tons and tons of images. Because we're using the language model, we're using things like Wikipedia, encyclopedias, websites, you name it. Then it goes through some fine tuning, right? These are actually people who are looking at responses and answering whether or not these are correct responses, correcting them, and they are feeding that back into the model. But at the same time, it's also going out to become an application, right? ChatGPT is an application. It is a chat interface that uses a model behind the scenes, whether it's ChatGPT 3 or 4, depending on your usage. That's the interaction. But as you're interacting with those tools, you're also sending data back. And they're sending information back. And so the pool of that information continues to improve and enhance the model. And so that's a very high level view of how generative AI works. Let's talk a little bit about the ecosystem then that's created by this ChatGPT application, right? You have a couple of different models out there that exist. You have a GPT-3 and a 3.5, and you have a GPT-4. GPT-3 and 3.5 are used by, 3 is not being used too much anymore now that most people have switched their APIs to 4, but 3.5 for those who are using the free version of ChatGPT, and GPT-4 for those who are using the paid version or the GPT-4 APIs, because that's a key point I want to make, is those models are feeding the ChatGPT, but they're also feeding thousands and thousands and thousands now of smaller applications by third-party creators who are using the model through an API, basically through a direct pipeline with the model. And then they're able to offer you, the consumer of their product, new features and new benefits using artificial intelligence. So that has created an enormous ecosystem outside of ChatGPT, but even within ChatGPT, the ecosystem has expanded quite a bit. They have, over the last 4 or 5 months, added plugins. Plugins are small applications that also use GPT that you interact with just like you were interacting with ChatGPT. But they give you certain benefits. And we're gonna, when I do the demo, we're gonna be doing it using GPT-4. So we'll be using the premium version. I'm gonna show those who haven't had a chance to actually see those plugins, what they look like. And then we're going to use something called Advanced Data Analytics, which is a fairly new offering from ChatGPT, which is pretty amazing, and that allows you to bring in some data and analyze it. And so those are the kind of features that have enriched the ChatGPT experience over the course of this last year as everybody's been following it.
And I just wanted to make a quick note, and if you're curious, like, how can ChatGPT possibly be free? They do cost a lot of money to run, and they're venture backed. However, some of the components of it getting smarter is about the free users using it. So
yeah,
you ask a question, you keep having to ask a question, reword it. What ChatGPT is trying, what the models are trying to do is they're trying to get that last answer. Because if you ask 9 questions, and then obviously the 9th question is, you're done. They've given you the best answer possible. So they're trying to get to that 9th answer, whether it's skipping 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even all 8 other questions that you have to ask. And so your data, your interactions, they're all being tracked in a way that will help ChatGPT improve its answer giving and therefore make a better model. So if you're wondering, that's in the short term, it's a huge value for anybody to be using it for free.
Amen to that. Yeah, absolutely. The old saying goes, if it's free, then the price is your data. And that's absolutely the case. You're the product, yeah.
You guys are the product.
That's right.
Even the paid users, actually. So it's kind of, yeah, everybody's
that's right.
being stored.
That's right. No free lunch in the world of generative AI. And to be fair, the cost of generative AI is astronomical, which is why so few companies in the world have been able to create models and these foundational models. They just take too much money to train and too many resources at this point.
Yep. And even in some countries, they're just not, like in the UK, they don't even have the chips available. So it's like there's a shortage of the chips to make their own models in their own hometown.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's very hard to get your hands right now on the kind of processors necessary to build these kind of models if you wanted to at home. 241 is our code word. Okay. Let's make sure we keep the right perspective on large language models and generative AI. Large language models, language specifically, not image, but language models, they're predicting really the next word in a sentence, right? Which is a little bit why a parrot is a pretty good metaphor for what it's doing. Is the parrot conscious of exactly what it's saying and the meaning behind those words? No, but can it do a really good job of communicating those words and fool you into thinking it's a human? Yeah. So in a way, it makes a great metaphor for how generative AI works today. The transformers I mentioned earlier, they allow for greater context, like I mentioned, and more of that human-like quality and reasoning that has really changed the way we see the AI models. And the fact that you can use natural language to communicate with them is really a byproduct of this transformer innovation. And then look, these models don't understand what they're saying, just like I mentioned a moment ago, and they do that exceptional job of mimicking. So you do have to keep those things in mind. I certainly didn't have them in mind the first time I saw generative AI were, in motion, and it was a jaw-dropping experience. And so it took a little bit of time to really understand what was going on there because it felt so lifelike, it felt so human. But it's important for us to keep the proper context that we're not talking to a human. We're still talking to a robot for that matter. Let's get practical. So things you can begin to start using ChatGPT for right now. Become a better writer, become a more succinct writer, improve your language skills. If English isn't your first language, it's incredibly powerful. If spelling's a problem, it can be very powerful. And if just plain old-fashioned grammar is an issue, it can do a very, very good job at that. So can other tools that have been on the market for a long time, but generative AI can do a great job with that. Summarize text. I mentioned the plugins. There's a lot of PDF readers in there for the very reason that a powerful thing that this generative AI can do is you give it a PDF or a other document and let it analyze that for you. And you're going to see an example of that with data here in just a few minutes, but it also applies to text. Brainstorm, solve problems, create pros and cons lists. Just think through life. Use it as a mental sparring partner. Code writing has become one of the most popular and probably important things that generative AI is doing right now. Simple as that, the ability to write code and translate code from one code form to another if necessary. Those kinds of things are saving time right now in businesses in the real world. Ask it about a problem you're having in a piece of software. Debugging, for example. Subhash, what am I missing? Anything?
So since we've got a lot of CPAs and CFOs here and controllers and all sorts of finance people, you can, without putting your data in there, you can get suggestions on equations in Excel. Once you get your equation in Excel, you might even be able to, if you wanted to dip your toes in R or Python, you could actually re-explain the problem. Once you do your job, do what you need to do to do your job, you could dip your toes in that by giving ChatGPT a mimicked version of your data source and explaining the problem. And it will give you code instead of you asking it to analyze your data. If you ask it to give you code to analyze it, it could actually be cleaner because its code is trained on actual GitHub repos. So it's got a lot of good data integrity.
Yeah, you're going to see that in action here in just a few minutes using their data analytics application. So analyze things, that's what we're going to do. Let's talk about the risks to keep in mind. And the first one I want to talk about is accuracy risk. And you may have heard about this. There is accuracy issues within generative AI, even the best models, the GPT-4s of the world. That can be factual inaccuracies, that can be code inaccuracies or the wrong code. That can be something called a hallucination, which and it's always going to attempt to answer you. And it's always going to answer in a way that feels most convincing, which is why as a human using generative AI, it's incredibly important that you're fact checking the work that's coming out of it. And it's a big reason why I want more people using generative AI to understand what those conditions are and what to look for when it comes to hallucination or inaccuracy issues, because more and more of the tools that they'll be using in high-risk situations like business will have these generative AI tools within them. And they also will definitely suffer from some level of hallucination. How Microsoft and Google and those others that are releasing products into the tools that we use at work every day, how they are going to prevent errors and how they're trying to limit those errors are still a mystery to those of us who are outside of that world, outside of their programming world, because it is just an inherent part of the generative AI process. Is, even if you build a model that's 98% accurate, that means 2% of the time it's going to get something wrong. When is that 2% going to happen? You need to be a human who can diagnose when that error has occurred, or you need to be using it in a way that errors are limited, or will have a very sort of low negative impact. So accuracy risk is one risk. Certainly, one thing to keep in mind, especially this is just specific to GPT and the GPT-4 models. Data in the model only goes through right now 2021, the end of 2021. And so if you're looking for information or to create something with newer information, that's going to be a challenge. 589, winning number 589. All right, data and security risk, right? Your chat's being stored somewhere. I mentioned earlier that that data is going back. Subhash mentioned it's going back in there. There is risk in that on a lot of different levels, right? Yes, it's protecting your data, and yes, you can opt out of those things. Mostly, we won't get into too much of the terms and conditions of ChatGPT, but there's some really basic things to keep in mind. And if you keep that in mind, you won't have to worry about the terms and conditions of ChatGPT, okay? One is to never put personally identifiable information into it, never put customer or client information into it, employees, health information, trade secrets. Basically, the rule is if you wouldn't publish it on the internet, don't put it in ChatGPT, right? And of course, you have to have a conversation with your IT folks in terms of what their policies and procedures and guidelines are for artificial intelligence. And that's an evolving process for a lot of security professionals out there have been tackling this question. There's a huge demand to use the tools, but there's also a lot of unknowns. Which is why it's incredibly important to avoid those things that you're seeing on the screen there. PII, customer information, trade secrets, HIPAA compliant issues, right? And that doesn't just go for ChatGPT, okay? That's going to go for other tools out there that may not even seem like AI at first. Things like Grammarly or Zoom has some new AI tools that are coming out. Those are all things that are going to be wonderful in terms of the value that they deliver. But if you are dealing with PHI on Zoom calls, or you're dealing with anything else, I would be concerned about using it. And so there's a lot of unknowns, but that's why it's important that if you're using it within the organization, that you're talking to your IT and security folks about that, following their guidelines, and just being safe, just using good common sense. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about prompt engineering, and then we're going to go out there and we're going to do some prompting. Okay. What? Subhash, your camera just came on. Okay, thought maybe you had something to say. The importance of good prompting. Okay, it's okay to humanize. This isn't Google, right? It's okay to humanize ChatGPT. I say hello to ChatGPT every time I use it. I say good morning, okay, or good afternoon. Maybe I'm weird, but that actually, there has been some research that shows that the more personable you are with it, the more effective its answers are. You're going to be very conversational with it. It will just be more natural that way. But you want to stick with one conversation at a time, one prompt at a time, okay? But one instruction per prompt, mostly, right? But use that whole chat to create a series of that we call prompt chaining, right? And you're going to see that in the analysis that we're going to do. The prompt chaining makes a lot of sense. And now GPT is doing a lot better of prompting you about, hey, maybe think about this next. And you'll see some of that in a moment. And give it feedback throughout the process, right? That was a little more information than I needed. That's a little less than I needed. Please give it to me in a different form. You're constantly giving it feedback. Never take its first answer as the truth necessarily, or as the solution, unless it's the right one for you, because you can always continue to iterate within that chat. Give it a job. Always set the stage. I'm going to set the stage today by saying, good morning, good afternoon, ChatGPT. You are an analyst today. That way it can sort of get in the right mindset, I guess. It's hard to explain what that would look like for AI, but it does help to focus that conversation on those things and answer it like an analyst would answer, and help it think like an analyst would think, okay? Be specific, but you don't have to be too specific, right? It's still incredibly good at sort of reading through the lines and also interpreting, what you're asking for, even if your grammar is poor or your spelling's off or you're not fully writing, complete sentences. It is going to try its best, but just know that the risk of inaccuracy does go up the less you follow prompt rules like this. Okay. Oh, if you could provide an example of what you're looking for, you definitely should do that. If you're unsure of ChatGPT's answer, or you don't like it, or you don't agree with it, or you think it could be better, ask it to justify those answers. Ask it to be self-reflective on that particular prompt and that particular response. And use negative prompts. Tell it what you don't want to see. I don't want you to go into detail on this, but I do want you to go in detail with that. Put constraints on your prompts. Use personas, like I mentioned. And that's it for the presentation part. But I do want to jump in to what we've been talking about and do some hands-on with ChatGPT. Okay, and what I'm going to do today, I'm going to give you guys a little tour. I'm sure many of you have been here, maybe even most. I'm going to give you a little tour of ChatGPT 4, which is something that fewer people probably have been a part of. And so if you're not part of the premium GPT-4, you're going to miss some of the features that are available. And I want to show off those features because I think they do a really good job of showing people what the future is going to look like, especially as we integrate generative AI into the tools that we use day in and day out, such as Microsoft Excel, for example, and your ability to take those tools now and to do analysis in a way that would have taken a lot longer before, certainly, and maybe some maybe 1 to 2 additional FTEs. So as you can see, the past chats are over here, okay? And you can set it to default, or you could set it to one of two things. Let's look at plugins first, because I did mention those earlier. There are literally in the plugin store now about 1,000 apps that run natively within ChatGPT doing an enormous number of different things. I think maybe the most popular 2 subjects in here are analyzing PDFs, sort of reading in PDFs, analyzing what they're saying, interpreting them, as well as code-related uses. So different coding environments and coding pads and different ways of interacting with code have become maybe the 2 most popular forms. But there's also, you can book travel, you can create visual diagrams, you can create all sorts of things using generative AI, and these tools make it easier. Only available to premium GPT-4 users. But what I wanted to focus in on today was their new advanced analytics features. And one more thing that you'll see, this is something fairly new, is if you come to GPT-4 without a prompt, to ChatGPT without a prompt, you can click one of these random prompts, I guess. I've not really played around with that just because I usually have a prompt. That's why I'm here. So I'm not sure how popular that will be. But the first step of this process to analyze data is actually bring in data to ChatGPT. And I'm actually going to be bringing in the famous Titanic data set, right? And I am going to prompt ChatGPT. Now I have a fairly long prompt, so I'm going to copy and paste it in here and then read it to you so I don't have to type it all out for you. But basically, I'm saying good morning. Well, it's afternoon now, so it'll probably laugh at me. So I better change that. Good afternoon, ChatGPT. Today, you're a data analyst, right? So I've given it a task, I've given it a job, I've given it an identity. You're tasked with understanding what factors are directly related to a passenger's chances of dying on the Titanic, right? It's the famous analysis of this problem. I'm going to upload the data set, and I want you to give me an overview of the data, i.e. the metadata. I want you to describe this data to me, okay? So we're going to go ahead and push play. It's going to generate, looking at the data, and it's generating a response. This typically takes, oh yeah, we will. And then here we go. Takes about less than 30 seconds today. It does vary depending on traffic. And so it is giving us an overview of each of the variables. It's giving us a description of what it thinks those variables are. And it's telling us a little bit about the how many empty values there are, what type of data it is, whether it's a float, an object. And I did this prompt exercise yesterday, and the responses it gave me, although the same information and they're accurate, it just like they're accurate here, it did give it to me in a completely different way, right? So know that, it is generating this completely from scratch. It is not pulling it from some memory. It is creating this by looking at that data and generating it. Okay, so if you notice at the bottom, it says, would you like to proceed with data cleaning or move directly to the analysis? Well, I could say, yeah, let's go ahead and move to data cleaning. Simple as that. And it's going to give me some recommendations on how to handle this data. It has some blank values that we need to deal with and tell it whether we need to impute anything. I'm going to say, data is fine as it is. As is. Begin analyzing. Begin the analysis for the original prompt. So it's going to start looking and trying to answer that question. And if you can see, it is looking at the following factors, which make a lot of sense. This is, what their cabin class was, what their gender was, what their age, whether there were siblings, children, the price of the fare, where they embarked from. Yes, I would. Yes, I would like to start with the descriptive, because what you're going to see is it's also going to begin to create visuals for us. Simple as that.
And as Greg's doing this, take a note that you have the ability to see the code that's being ran.
I'm glad you said that.
Can kind of dive into, dip your toes into code. Like we solve business problems all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Why not, to learn code, why don't you, use a little bit of this ChatGPT?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I had forgotten to open up a code to show folks how this is working. If you noticed, it is writing code in real time in Python, and that code is where it's getting its answers. So you can actually see the result here within Python, and it's just being kind of reformatted here to be easier for people. Okay, and so we're getting close on time. And I want Subhash to show a little bit of what he brought, and I also want to open it up for questions. So I'm going to kind of wrap this by asking it, okay, great. Describe the passenger most likely to survive the Titanic. The crux of the analysis, right?
Greg, guess what? We got a question. Yay.
Awesome.
So somebody asked, can ChatGPT prep a PowerPoint slide deck from an article?
So that is the claim that Microsoft is making, that the Copilot within PowerPoint, because Copilot's going to sit in all of their major products within Office, right? And so PowerPoints, big claim is that you'll be able to basically prompt your way through creating a PowerPoint. Whether ChatGPT can do it, can prep a PowerPoint slide deck from an article. There
So,
are plugins that claim it can create presentations. I have tried a couple of them, and I found that they were more frustrating than acceptable, which is why I have greater hope that Microsoft will be able to build that user experience into PowerPoint in a more effective way. So the answer is yes, but it's not quite where you want it to be yet, in my experience. Subhash,
and
have you played with any of those?
I did, and I
Mm.
do, I love it. But the very first thing I do is I ask it a bunch of, I give it context of the subject matter, and it takes a little
Uh-huh.
bit of work. And I just, AKA, you just dump a lot of art, you paste the article in, the
Mhm.
context, maybe you paste some competing articles, and then what you do is you say, give me an outline. And then with the outline, then you ask it to implement one slide at a time. Or,
Yeah,
and so basically, then it can put really good slides and then have like that sort of thing. So yeah,
yeah.
I've been able to, because I mean, PowerPoint slides shouldn't be 60 pages anyway. So
Well, that's
if you're dealing with like 5 to 15 slides, it's really like 15 different, but you keep the same chat thread, but
yeah,
then you ask, okay, let's go to this
yeah.
topic. And then you actually use that. So it's totally doable. Thank you for the question.
That's a great question. And so, yeah, the analysis is done, and it just did a great job of describing who would be the most likely to survive, right? It's people in first class, young people, female, um, few or none, no siblings, and ticket fare high. And that's just the facts. And in order to validate this process as I went, I also, basically had taken the data and put together a Power BI slide that I made sure that the data that was coming through was correct, that it actually reflected the proportions that ChatGPT said it did, and it did. And so because I did that validation, I have a lot more confidence in that analysis. And that's the kind of activity you would want to do if you're going to use ChatGPT to analyze anything. And if you are going to use it to analyze anything, you want to make sure that you have anonymized that data and that it does not have any sensitive information in.
Very true. And also, you could even ask ChatGPT, hey, I have an Excel file. Can you, with these columns and
Mhm.
each column has this kind of value, how do I make a script to anonymize it? You could do that
Beautiful.
too.
That's a
So,
great.
okay, so we have another question. Could
Uh,
ChatGPT allow sales staff to complete a PDF contract without admin support?
I would think that would be a narrow AI kind of application.
Now,
Can it?
so on that side, it depends what the clauses would be. And again, this is where it could be a little scary because to me, those are legal clauses. There are tools that are specialized in specifically contract writing that would probably be better than generic chat GPT. However, if you need suggestions of how can I make this, like I personally used it to, I've like taken a document that I found that I was going to make my starter template and I didn't understand clauses and I had it explain it to me. And then I had to rewrite it in a way I understood. And then
Mhm.
it still went through through insurance and legal, but like it created more context because I understood. And there is a third question, but I mean, do you have any more on that question about staff to complete a PDF
I mean,
contract?
it's one of those things where it's sort of like it probably could, but should it? I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a tough
Sure.
one. The next one is one
By the way,
I
thank you
can't.
for the questions.
Yeah,
Keep
thank you
coming.
so much.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Is there
Question?
a way to check the content produced by ChatGPT for copyright infringement?
No, there is not. Um, if it's generating something, it's generating something original, but it may be using copyrighted material. In fact, I guarantee it is somewhere in the depths of it. Um, this is an important question, and it's one of those that is speculative, right? Because there's going to be a lot of legal precedent that is going to be set over the next several years about how generative AI is using copyrighted material. There's been a few solutions out on the market, right? Image generation is already, I think, a little further on this because of the work that folks like Adobe are doing to compensate people for using their art or creative expression in their generative models. And, it's still early days for that, whether that works or not, the royalty system, I don't know, but at least people are addressing it. And there's going to be some creative thoughts in terms of how to address it.
New York Times is suing ChatGPT for like $150K an article. Reddit is now charging their developers for the API. And so keep asking questions. Greg, are you done with this? So I can actually show this, the Photoshop, the Adobe Photoshop, because I feel like we can almost, I can almost show and just not really tell, just show in the background. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think let's do it. Let's show a little bonus.
Yeah, because there's another type of
excited to see
you
it.
mentioned image generation, and there's a fun. I'm just gonna have fun with this while you guys are asking questions. Somebody made a comment saying for an aircraft accident, it would probably be different. First class survivor value would be different to the Titanic ship's first class value. Yeah, yep.
That's probably true. Depending on tail end first or head first, but
Cool. So I got an image from the internet of an otter, and I'm just gonna have fun with it. But please keep asking questions. I'm just gonna, just kind of make some art over here. And this is all generated because, another question came up. Do you think ChatGPT was released too early? Okay, Greg, I'll let you start with that answer.
Okay, I'll start with that answer. That's a really good question. I mean, was it too early? I'm not sure. I guess reflectively now, I don't think it was, only because it was inevitable. Generative AI was an inevitability, and it was a matter of time before somebody did. I do respect OpenAI and what they've done around safety and security and some of the conversations they're having. They haven't been perfect by any means. But I think if there was a company who was going to release this product that was going to change the world, and it did, I think they're as good as many, and a lot better than some. And so I think it's important that it happened because it began the conversation, because we're sitting here on a webinar right now talking about it. If we weren't, then it would just be delaying the inevitable. And so it stirred up in the populace a desire to understand artificial intelligence and to use artificial intelligence. And that means it stirred up people thinking about the legislative implications of that, the economic implications of that, the existential implications of that. And it's built up this kind of sort of new economy, even within its first 8 months of existence, 10 months of existence now.
Yeah. So yeah, and I agree. It was bound to happen. Being that we were doing NLP, by the way, Richmond, Virginia has a linguistics lab in BCU. They've been doing it for 4 years. So there's a lot of text mining and linguistics already happening. Yeah. I'm going to jump to the 6th question. This is called Adobe Photoshop. It has embedded AI. So I'm just describing stuff. I'm mentioning a lifeboat. I'm having it crash. I'm going to put some survivors on it. We're going to have some fun. I'm going to add some otters. So that answers question 6. Question 5, should OpenAI change their company name as their product flagship? ChatGPT is not truly open source. That seems like a great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I probably, it's not quite as open as their original intention was, but for some pretty good reasons, I think. But yeah, they'll probably change their name to something Microsoft once they get fully purchased by them, I'm sure. Yeah, it's tricky because while it is open, I think of it as kind of like it's kind of opening the doors to conversation. I've never heard anybody. It was as a data scientist who's been trying to inspire people who aren't in data science and try to get them in. That was my full-time job. Now I don't know. I'm in a different world where people are actually coming to me with very realistic business problems that AI could actually solve. And it's pretty fascinating. I'm not upset that basically that was very special to me. Like that was my skill. People are coming with like, oh, I want to predict this when I make this decision and this and this and this automation. They're coming to me with like real actual data science problems. So we have another question.
will Microsoft purchase OpenAI? I'll let Greg answer this one.
I make no claims that I have any information on that. It was just, random theory kind of thing. Because Microsoft has invested billions into OpenAI and are very closely partnered with them. But they've also, partnered with other AI providers that are not related to OpenAI. And so, it's definitely their very clearly stated strategy to double down on AI, for better or worse.
It's very intermingled. OpenAI is kind of its own thing, but it's got so much support for Microsoft, and basically any profit it makes goes back to Microsoft, the way the deal was struck. But then
that's the only reason
Microsoft,
I said that. Yeah.
They're competing for chips because Microsoft just wants to make Microsoft its own thing. And so they're like, they'll just connect these two. And then there's something called Hugging Face, which Hugging Face is basically GitHub for models that are like that. And that also is coming to play because that's getting a lot of investments. And so that's coming in, but they are going to be encouraging people that they're really putting it into people's hands. And somebody just mentioned, if you're using Photoshop AI to create a picture or content, do you have source? No. Do you have to source it in publications? That is maybe a great question.
Okay, so this is actually kind of unique to Adobe, right? Which is this concept, and they've really been pushing this, that if you create something in Adobe Photoshop, it's yours. You go use it. If somebody sues you, they will cover your lawsuit. This is, I mean, I'm not making this up. This is actually the claim that they're making. They will cover you. They feel so confident that whatever is generated is not going to be generated on something already copywritten. And they have agreements with some of the biggest stock photo companies out there, reciprocating and paying for those pictures and those images.
Yeah.
So
I've even had trouble with, like, sometimes you're just generating an image and they say we're not even going to generate it because it's not worth the risk. You can tell, like, name specific people, specific concept, they just won't.
Specific people for sure. It won't create. You can't create Donald Trump fake news here, can you? You wouldn't be able to create a character, a person.
Correct. You can't
and generate them, right? You couldn't create that here.
You can create a president, and you can explain that president.
A general president, though, a generic president. You couldn't put Joe Biden here, right?
Right.
So that's something important to keep in mind for this product. Certainly, you can do that in other products, which will remain nameless, and there will certainly be more that are popping up. I know we're at the end.
Great question oh yeah, we are at the end.
So we'll take it this last one.
And I'm still sharing, but yeah.
This will be an easy one. Should our business have an AI usage policy? Sorry.
Can't we have it go a little bit extra, right? We can go like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah. Well, I do want to answer this as sort of the last question. So question 9, should our business have an AI usage policy, is the easiest question yet. The answer is yes. I mean, I don't know of another way to think about it. If you have data and you have information in your organization and you want to use AI, you need to be working with your IT professionals and creating a policy on how that's used. And working with your general counsel as well before you expand and promote that work. Simple as that.
Any other questions? While we still have a bunch of questions. And so this is basically how the AI art would work. Sometimes you ask it questions and all this, but if anybody has a question about this too, I'm happy to. Okay, so there's no other questions, and thank you guys so much for your attention and your opening your mind to learning something exciting and challenging. And Greg?
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and thanks for sticking around. And of course, if you have more questions, you can reach out to us, and we'd love to have a conversation about AI and continue the conversation with you. Okay.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.